Week 3 of the NFL season starts tonight, and boy, do we have a show for you guys today. I have a lot that I want to get into, but mainly our Week 3 NFL predictions. So if you enjoy, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what you think in the comments. All right, let's kick it off here with Week 3 NFL Power Rankings. I'm gonna run through my top 10. Should be tons of fun. Let's get into it. At number 10, we have a team that has scored 40 plus points in 3 straight games dating back to last season. The new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak has really opened up this offense. And at the end of the day, it is an election year. That seemingly is when Derek Carr has his best years. Don't believe me? Go look it up. But again, they've dominated offensively, defensively. Big test for them this week against Philadelphia. At number 9, I want to talk about a team that is led by a quarterback that has an unusual quarterback path as far as when he got his starting position, at least his second chance in the league. And that is Geno Smith and the Seattle Seahawks. They come in at number 9. And I found some of these stats, and I want to throw them out there for you guys at home. Since 2021, only one quarterback has hit all 3 of these thresholds in a certain week. This is dating back, of course, to last week against the Patriots. 40 plus dropbacks, an average depth of targets of 8 plus yards, and 0 off target throws. That, of course, is according to the deeper analytics. That quarterback is, you guessed it, Geno Smith. On the year, Geno Smith he has a completion percentage over expected in the 97th percentile. There's nobody in the league that's close to Geno Smith. He's playing out of his mind. The defense is great, led by Mac McDonald, and they have a great chance here to get a statement victory in Week 3 at home against Miami. I like Seattle this week. At 7 and 8, these are teams that have been right next to each other all offseason for me. The New York Jets and the Dallas Cowboys. The Jets and the Cowboys lost. They dropped a spot. The Jets, they won. They jumped up a spot. But neither team, it's far, I think, from their best versions. I think we still have a lot to see from these teams. Now, again, you have the argument of New Orleans just beat Dallas. They should be ahead of them. I can understand that. But as of right now, I think Dallas has a little bit more potential as far as the entire season in totality. They're at 8. New York is at 7. I want to see the Jets fine-tune a lot of things. We have yet to see the best versions from either of these teams. At 5 and 6, the same can be said about these two teams. But the Bills, man, sometimes less is more. I compare this team to the 2015 Panthers a lot. And, for good reason. And they're off to a good start if they want to mimic what Carolina did back in 2015. But this week, big game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they can handle business and improve to 3-0. Ladies and gentlemen, and yes, that's after losing Stephon Diggs. The Eagles, you lost, and you had so many costly penalties down the stretch, but you have so much talent on this roster that you would think they can figure this out eventually, right? Maybe not. At number 3 and 4, again, a lot of these teams can be grouped together. These two are no different. The Detroit Lions, my preseason Super Bowl favorite, as well as many others, they have done everything. But last week was probably the worst game I've ever seen from Jared Goff in a Detroit Lions uniform. I think he's far better than what he showed, and I think there's no doubt in my mind Ben Johnson and his offense gets back on track next week. Also, shout out to Aiden Hutchinson. 5 sacks in a single week. Insane. We'll talk about him later. For the Niners, look, you've just had injuries. Deebo Samuel is now down. You want to see Brandon Ayuk, after paying him all that money, take a step up. But, again, you lost a game, or you lost last week, and that should say they went down 1 spot, not 4. Of course, that is not possible. But Brandon Ayuk, time to step up. At 1 and 2, am I overreacting? Let me know. Kansas City, they're at number 1. We all know why. At number 2, Houston, find the flaws. That's my point here. I think offensively, they have everything. They have so many talented weapons. A guy like John Mechie, that was a star at Alabama, came into the league, of course, had some health issues, but last year showed flashes. He's getting DNPs. This is a guy that would be the number 2 wide receiver in Dallas. He's getting DNPs in this Houston offense. You got to find the flaws on this team. They have everything that you would possibly want outside of proven, deep playoff experience. But outside of that, again, I believe they have everything to make a deep run in the AFC and give Kansas City a run for their money. But here's my top 10. If there was any team that should have an argument to be in this list, number 1 is Tampa Bay. Number 2, I would say probably the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, now I want to transition the show over to teams that have started off the season great and teams not so great to start the year. Again, I want to look at the history of these teams that are 2-0 and 0-2, and what does history tell us about these teams and their playoff hopes for 2024? Let's dive into it. Teams that we thought would be playoff teams this year, if not Super Bowl caliber teams, teams like the Ravens, Bengals, Colts, and Rams, it doesn't look very bright for them going forward. Since 2021, they have an average win-loss record of 6 to 10 wins, which is the same range as the counterpart here. But again, it's these bottom stats that matter. And again, these stats are for teams that have started off the year 0-2. They include everything. Teams that are actually good teams and teams that suck like the Panthers from last year. The best record after an 0-2 start has been two different teams. The Bengals in 2022, when they went to the Super Bowl, they finished the year 12-4 after an 0-2 start. And the Texans from last year, they started off 0-2, of course, made the second round of the playoffs. But all in all, again, only 9.5% of teams that have started off 0-2 in the history of football have made the playoffs. But most recently, the teams like the Bengals and the Texans from the last couple of years, they are, of course, they come top of the mind. 19% of teams that have started off 0-2 have ended above 500. So you have a slim chance to do it. But again, there is a chance. Let's look on the counterpart here. Teams that have started off 2-0, overachieved so far this season, but maybe, again, can they make a playoff push, or are they going to fall back to reality like some of the teams we're going to mention? But the teams that have the worst record for a team that has started off the year 2-0, would be the last year's Commanders. They started off 2-0, but they ended off 4-13. Not a great start for Commanders fans. But then back in 2021, I believe that was Cam Newton's last year. They started off 2-0, ended off 5-12. Over the last, again, couple of years, 77% of the teams that have started off 2-0 have made the playoffs. So it gives you a huge advantage. Again, you're not digging yourself out of this seemingly insurmountable hole that you've made for yourself in the first couple of weeks. Some of the notable teams that have missed the playoffs after being 2-0 to start the year: the 2021 Broncos, Panthers, the 2023 Falcons, Commanders, and Saints. A lot of teams in that NFC South. But since, again, over the last couple of years, 77% of the teams have at the bare minimum ended the season above 500 after starting 2-0. So the Saints, Vikings, Bucks, you're in a great position to do great things. Now, Amir could not join the show if you couldn't tell already. He's a collegiate cornerback. His schedule is busy, and it's just a good thing that he can make time for the show. But I still want to give his answers for you guys at home. I wanted to go through some of these teams that we're the most confident in, the teams that have shocked us so far, and the team that we're most worried about. For me, again, the Chiefs, you're 2-0, you're most confident. They look better than last year and the year before, which are, of course, back-to-back Super Bowl winners. You're confident in them, right? Especially with how great they've looked. They just need to get healthy now, or they need some people to step up after Pacheco went down. A guy like Carson Steele, they're going to look his way. Or Kareem Hunt, right, in his return to Kansas City. I'm most confident in the Houston Texans. As I mentioned earlier, find the flaws. The 2-0 team that I'm shocked by the most, I think, is going to have to be the Minnesota Vikings. I did not believe in this Sam Darnold hype train. I said I believe in the rest of the team. The defense is a little bit shaky on paper, but I said I believe in Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator, and, of course, the coach, and Kevin O'Connell before the season. I just didn't know what version of Sam Darnold we were going to get. But hey, we're getting the best version out of everybody right now. So the Vikings, even though they're missing Jordan Addison, their second best option on offense, and their superstar tight end in TJ Hockenson, they still started off the year 2-0. 2 straight weeks they've been underdogs, and they still get the job done. So I'm most shocked by them. I think they can be one of those sneaky teams on the bubble here when we talk about playoff time. The Saints, for Amir, look, we talked about them for my power rankings. Absolutely amazing start to the year. No offense has been better. The 0-2 teams that I'm most worried about for Amir, it's the Rams. Look, it's injuries, right? Injuries and age for them, but they have one of the best coaches in the league. They need to bounce back just like last year. Find some gems, right? Guys like Jordan Whittingham, right? That could come out of nowhere, right? A guy like Kobe Parkinson could take a step up in the absence of Kupp and Puka Nacua. But for me, it is the Tennessee Titans. Look, Bill Callahan, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, he seemingly has already lost hope in a guy like Will Levis, a guy that's made a lot of boneheaded plays and potentially has been the sole reason why this team is 0-2 and not 2-0 to this point in the season. But for the Titans, look, the defense has been amazing, but they can only do so much. And on offense, I mean, Tony Pollard has been your best player. Outside of that, you're barely getting DeAndre Hopkins looks, let alone the ball. And Calvin Ridley's been okay to start the year, but far from what he was paid this offseason. It's got to be the quarterback at this point in time. But there's plenty of time for this team to figure it out. But for a team that had a slim chance, believing they can make a playoff run, I believe it's all but over for a team like the Tennessee Titans. But that might come back to haunt me. Some players of the week that we wanted to throw out there. We always want to do one offensively and defensively. For offensively, it's Alvin Kamara. 4 total touchdowns, 180 total yards. He led his team single-handedly, it seems like, to a 2-0 start, and he did all of that on only 22 touches. So basically every 5th touch was a touchdown for Alvin Kamara. And then on the defensive side, Aiden Hutchinson. The team only had 5 sacks. Aiden Hutchinson had all 5, and they weren't half sacks. They were all by himself. He was a one-man wrecking crew. Before the season, I said he was going to be my defensive player of the year. And according to Vegas, that was a bit of a long shot. I think he's on a pretty good trajectory to do so. The Lions just need to get back to being dominant and finishing games. But he was PFF's number 1 rated pass rusher for week 2. No duh. But of course, he gets our week 2 honors. If you made it to this point, congratulations, right? We did a lot of talking. But now let's get into week number 2, or week number 3, excuse me. I like to give you guys these stats as I find them because the more the merrier for all of us football fans. But let's take a look. Last week, it was my worst week dating back to middle of last NFL season. 9-7. Of course, still above 500, where I want to be, just not this close to the 500 mark. Amir, of course, was 7-9. That is his worst week ever on this channel. I had to do some history after a week like that. But it is worth mentioning that out of the 16 games last week, 14 of them, the underdog won. So it's kind of hard to guess all of those at a high level. But if you did, power to you. On the season, though, I'm guessing at about a 63% correct rate. I'm excited to see if we can bounce back and in a big way. Let's start off here. Thursday Night Football tonight, we have the New England Patriots who have, honestly, even though they're 500, they've gotten off to a hot start. Last week, of course, didn't end the way that they wanted, but overall on the year, this is an offense that has protected the football. Jacoby Brissett has done his job to the best of his ability, right? Protect the football and game manage. Do the bare minimum that you can and win the game. But, of course, Ramondre Stevenson has been the engine of this offense and the engine of this team outside of the defense where you're getting a breakout year from Christian Gonzalez and the rest of that defensive crew. But Ramondre's, 25 touches a game, about 100 total yards a game, 4 yards a touch is not bad. That's always going to give you a chance to move the sticks is what I'm getting at. But Jacoby Brissett, like I was mentioning, he's game managing. He's only passing for 135 yards a game, which doesn't seem like a lot. But again, passing numbers are down this year. They are the lowest that they've been since like the mid-2000s, which, again, wasn't a primarily pass-dominant era of football. Kind of crazy that you would think. It's kind of backwards, right? You think in the most pass-happy era ever, you would think the numbers would be through the roof, but it is exactly the opposite. Defenses are evolving, right? But they go to New York tonight. They play a team that I think on the opposite side has gotten off to a slow start. There is a lot of fine-tuning that is needed in this New York Jets offense. But on the plus side, Aaron Rodgers has his first win as a Jet under his belt, and these running backs killed it. I mean, Braylon Allen is 20 years old. He is younger than me, the guy you're listening to, and he had 2 touchdowns last week. Of course, the youngest player in the league, rookie running back out of Wisconsin, dominated. Of course, his combine slipped in the draft, and the Jets got a gem later on. But Breece and Braylon, Thunder and Lightning, they are going to have a big workload for the rest of the season. Excited to see how they can carry this offense. Aaron Rodgers is only going to get more comfortable. This defense, if they can fine-tune some things, should only get better. Nathaniel Hackett and Rodgers, first time working together in some time, again, from a week-to-week basis. I'm excited for this game tonight. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. I'm going to bet the under on this game. That's for sure. But for the Jets, I'm going to take them in this matchup. I have them as a top 10 team. I think that if they can get things going in the right direction, they could be a Super Bowl contender, as crazy as that sounds. But again, got to give this team some time. They need to tune some things. It's the first time everyone's healthy at once. So for the Jets, I'm going to take them here at home. Let's move over here to the Sunday slate of games. And we're going to start off with a homer pick, and I'm going to get it out the way. I'm going to take the Browns in this game. First half of last week against the Jags, the offense and Deshaun Watson looked fluid. It looked like the best offense I've seen under Deshaun Watson in a Cleveland Brown uniform. And this is a team that I think is headed in the right direction. I think, again, we're getting closer and closer to Nick Chubb's return. When that happens, it's going to open up the offense more. But happy to see a week like I did last week from a guy like D'Onta Foreman, right? He kind of carried the offensive load, had the most touches offensively, and he didn't even play in week 1, if I'm not mistaken. Last week, of course, led the team in touches and helped us a lot in that game against the Jags. But again, defense did their job. They got after the passer. They had a clutch safety late in that game against Jacksonville. The defense is still there. We just need the offense. It's the same story that we've been saying about the Browns for about a year now. But I'm taking them in this matchup because the Giants here are in a weird situation. They started off 0-2. I picked them to win week 1. That was far from happening. And then week 2, of course, didn't go their way either. But I will say, in the first 2 games this year, Malik Neighbors has been as advertised, and he's even been more than what they drafted here with the second receiver off the board. 7 receptions, 95 yards a game, first career touchdown last week. He is the focal point of this offense, and he's going to be getting the ball a lot here throughout the remainder of the season, no matter if Daniel Jones is the quarterback or who else. But this Giants team, just the defense, again, is, I guess they're the only bright spot of this team. Of course, if I can find my words, they're the only bright spot of this team so far this year, outside of Malik Neighbors offensively. Daniel Jones, again, just not a great quarterback. He was overpaid at the time, but the Giants kind of had to do it based on the season that they had prior to that contract extension. But, I mean, more pick sixes than touchdowns thrown since you signed that big mega deal. Not a great sign for the Giants and Giants fans. Now, if you don't win this game, Giants fans, you are 0-3, and your next 2 games after that, you have the Dallas Cowboys, and then you go to Seattle in the 12th man to a much improved Seattle team. It's not looking bright for you. You need to kind of get an upset here in these next 3 weeks. Otherwise, I think you're going to be in that Carson Beck / Quinn Ewers conversations in a couple months. I'm taking the Browns to clarify. Here we go. We have an interesting matchup here. The Eagles actually come into this game as dogs, going to New Orleans to play the New Orleans Saints. 2 top 10 teams for me. And for the Philadelphia Eagles, last week, you should have won that game. You should, even though A.J. Brown was out, you dominated offensively by committee. Jalen Hurts found his legs again, but Devontae Smith led the room, as he should, as a number 1 Heisman wide receiver. But again, everybody contributed on this offense without A.J. Brown. And that's the same thing they're going to have to face this week, especially when a guy like Marshawn Lattimore is going to be covering Devontae Smith on every single play. You're going to have to find some other people to step up, like Dallas Goedert, right? Like Johnny Wilson from FSU, like the other receivers in this offense, because Saquon is going to do Saquon things, and Jalen Hurts is going to be fine. You just need some of these other guys to step up and maybe have a big week. You're on the road here. And you're playing a team that has made minimal mistakes, unlike the Philadelphia Eagles, who last week threw the game away on Monday night against the Falcons. The Saints, on the other hand, have scored 40-plus points in 3 straight weeks dating back to last season. They have scored 91 points so far this year, which is the most in franchise history in a 2-week stretch. You have last week against the Dallas Cowboys at home. I wanted to throw this out there because, again, in the grand scheme of things, it's meaningless, but I think it's just pure dominance on paper. They scored in every single first half possession they had in 7 possessions against the Dallas Cowboys in week 1 last week, or week 2, excuse me. So again, it goes without saying, number 1 offense, the defense has still been top 10 level. Clint Kubiak has opened up this offense to degrees that we didn't think were possible. And at the end of the day, it is an election year, and that's seemingly when Derek Carr plays his best football. I honestly, this is one of those games. There's 3 games this week that I'm really up in the air about. I don't know who to pick, but I'm going to go with my gut. I'm going to say the Eagles get an upset win here. If they are going to be the team that I think they can be, they're going to have to get some of these big wins and sooner rather than later. So I'm going to take the Eagles here as an underdog pick for the week. And again, the talent is there, right? They just need to stop making so many stupid decisions and mistakes that cost them these games, just like it did for the majority of last year. But Eagles on the road. The Texans going to Minnesota. Battle of 2 undefeated teams. One of them should fall unless this game would end in a tie. But for the Texans, find the flaws, man. Elite pass rush. The coaching staff looks to be amazing. Of course, you have C.J. Stroud, your superstar quarterback, all the weapons he could possibly want, and then some around him. There's not many flaws with this Texans team outside of a deep playoff run. Of course, I'm meaning in like the Final Four and, of course, even a Super Bowl appearance. That could happen this year with how great this Texans team has looked. For the Vikings, you're home. Look, this is the 3rd straight game as an underdog, and you are 2-0. And that is not just against, minimal opponents. That includes, again, great teams, most notably like the San Francisco 49ers. Now, after the game last week against San Fran, Justin Jefferson did have a quad injury. Is he going to suit up this week? He says he wants to, but again, there's a possibility he could be a late game scratch. Now, Sam Darnold, in these 2 games, has averaged 240 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. There's also a pick along the way on average there. But overall, he's had his best career, stretch so far this season with the Minnesota Vikings. With all that said, though, I'm going to continue picking against the Vikings. So Vikings fans, that's a good thing because I've picked against them the first 2 weeks of the year. But at the end of the day, Brian Flores is an amazing defensive coordinator. Kevin O'Connell, amazing coach. This is the team that might have a sneaky chance at the playoffs, but I'm going to take the Texans. I just think that they're too loaded top to bottom. We can run through this one quickly. The Denver Broncos, they've just been so far this year. The play calling has been up and down. The receivers aren't giving Bo Nix much help. Bo Nix has been actually very solid, right, so far in his rookie year. Some boneheaded decisions along the way, but he's a rookie. But again, they're not helping him much offensively. The defense has kind of struggled at times. They're going to Tampa, one of the hottest teams in the league, a team that is led by maybe one of the funnest leaders in the game of football in Baker Mayfield. And I think they continue to stay hot. I mean, Chris Godwin is in the slot like he was when Brady was there. And he's been dominant this year. 7 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown every single game. Great to have Chris Godwin in fantasy football. But Mike Evans is going to have the Patrick Surtain matchup. So Mike Evans is going to be shadowed all game. I think Chris Godwin's going to have a big game this week. And, of course, Rachaad White is out. That's the only kind of the caveat here that I might say Denver might have a chance at an upset. But for the Tampa Bay Bucks, you're counting on rookie Bucky Irving, a receiving back. He is literally a mini Rachaad White to a degree. So I have no worries about this Tampa Bay offense. And at the end of the day, Mike Evans is still going to be Mike Evans, even if the best corner in the game is on him. I'm going to take Tampa at home here. Again, I think they just are a way better team, and they're destined for a lot more this year than a team like Denver. This is an interesting one. Malik Willis is making his second start here for the Green Bay Packers in a revenge game on paper against his old team, the Tennessee Titans. This is a team that last week they knew their scheme and they ran it quite literally against the Indianapolis Colts. They gave Josh Jacobs 32 carries and he had 150 yards. Now, we did have a fumble inside the red zone, which would have gave fantasy managers even more to be happy about. But Josh Jacobs, amazing week last week. This is a team that I think knows their game plan, and they're going to stick to it on a weekly basis. Now, or at least until Jordan Love comes back, which apparently might be in the near future. But for the Packers, this is what I worry about. If you're going to be a ground and pound offense, and if the defenses are going to force Malik Willis to make those occasional throws, I worry about it because the Titans have a very good defense, especially up front in that front seven. Of course, led by Jeffrey Simmons. They are stacked up front, and I think if this defensive front of the Titans at home can get after this run and stop it early on, forcing Malik Willis to make these throws, I mean, the Titans might have a chance to get their first win on the season here, but at the end of the day, this offense eventually needs to step up. The Packers have a pretty good defense as well. I'm going to take the Packers on the road here, man. I hate to continue taking road teams because history tells us that's not really the case on a weekly basis, but I think the Packers are just a better team top to bottom, and I'm going to bank on I'm going to bank on LaFleur to have this offense, moving in the right direction, more so than I'm going to bank on Will Levis to not make as many idiotic mistakes that he is making early on this season. Taking the Packers on the road. The Bears and the Colts here. Look, in the first half of Sunday Night Football, in his primetime debut, Caleb Williams did look comfortable. I think he was processing the field great. I was thinking he was getting the ball out quick, efficiently, to his weapons, letting them get the ball in space and going to work. And of course, the defense looked great in that first half as well. Of course, they're also heading on the road again against their third straight NFC or AFC South opponent. They played Tennessee week 1, Houston, and now the Indianapolis Colts. So they're just going through the gauntlet of the AFC South. But for the Bears, again, the second half was a different story for the offense. The defense has been great all season. I think the defense will continue to be great, and it will give them a chance against the Colts here. But something just tells me, my gut says, look, this is a Colts team that has not had their way in the win-loss department. But on the field, they've still been a dominant team. Now, last week they struggled, but in the first half of the game last week, and of course against the Texans that entire game, we saw how dominant this offense can be when they get the ball moving on the ground. The second half of last week, they kind of went away from Jonathan Taylor completely, even though he had 100 yards on the ground in the first half alone. They just went away from him for no reason in that second half. A player that talented, you can't just minimize in the game plan. So Shane Steichen, first hiccup there I've seen in his year or so of head coaching. But again, I have no worries about this Colts team. They're 0-2. They're desperate for a win. And I think this defense can pick apart a rookie and guy like Caleb Williams. I think Leatu Latu maybe gets a sack in this game. He has some history with Caleb Williams there from UCLA and the USC matchup there in college. I think the Colts here at home, they need a win, and I think they get a win to defend home field, getting on the board in the right direction, and both teams come out of week 3 at 1-2. This is probably the hardest matchup to predict this week for me. For the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins, I mean, he came off an Achilles injury, and he's dominating. In limited touches the last 2 weeks, 130 yards on the ground, a touchdown every single game so far. And last week, they finally got decent production out of Quentin Johnston, of course, second-year receiver out of TCU. And this is really the first time last week where he showed promise and potential, and he showed that he was worth a first-round selection. So if Jim Harbaugh can continue to get this kind of production out of QJ, I'm excited to see how much that'll open up the offense. Now, Ladd McConkey, of course, has been solid, or he was solid in week 1, week 2. Quentin Johnston showed up. So it seems like it's just going to be one guy in the receiving game every single week for this Chargers offense, and then it's the ground game. So pretty much the Michigan offense and what we expected from Jim Harbaugh taking this job. But they head to Pittsburgh, and Justin Fields on paper seems to be their guy for week 3. And this has been the Steelers team that we've expected. Look, we know they have a gauntlet of a schedule from week 5 on. These first 4 weeks are so pivotal. I said before the year, this first month of the year was no more important than anybody else than the Steelers, if that makes any sense. The Steelers needed to come out strong this year, and they've done that. The defense has been dominant. The offense has been doing just enough, but they don't even have a passing touchdown so far this year. 2 weeks in, they're 2-0. Must be nice to have a defense that has been that great so far this year. Now, for the Chargers, look, I'm not sure what to make of their defense. It's been amazing, but this same core of players hasn't been amazing. They've been bottom of the league the last couple of years. I know they have a coordinator change, but what defense are we going to get, right? Go throughout the remainder of the season. Hopefully it's what we've seen already. I think all signs point to the Chargers winning this game, but I think the Steelers have such a dominant front on the defensive side of the ball that I think they can disrupt the run game, and they're going to force some of these younger wide receivers to make a play. And I'm going to, in that case scenario, I think we're going to get a low-scoring matchup. I'll say that. But I'm going to take Pittsburgh here. I'm going to take Pittsburgh. I think they finally get a passing touchdown or 2 this week. I think if there were to be a statement game from Justin Fields to keep his job this year, it would be this game, right? A game against a team that, this is a tough matchup. Of course, if I can find my words. It's a tough matchup for both teams, but I think the Steelers, if there was a statement game, it needs to be from Justin Fields this week. I think he needs to come out and have a couple scores, and I think we need to see the best version of this offense to give the Steelers hope for the remainder of the year. So Steelers at home here against the Chargers. Sorry for the long-winded response. I believe we're in the 4 o'clock window now with the Miami Dolphins going to Seattle to take on Geno Smith and this offense that is only going to get better this week as Ken Walker should return, at least as of right now. Ken Walker looks like he's going to be back in the lineup. If not, this Seattle offense is fine. I talked about Geno early in the show, but JSN and DK Metcalf combined for 22 receptions, 250 yards, and a touchdown last week. They did everything, of course, and Tyler Lockett seems to be an afterthought in this offense. But again, Ken Walker's coming back. They're at home. I like them in this matchup against a team that, yes, they've had 10 days off. Yes, they've had plenty of time to game plan for the Seattle Seahawks and, of course, adapt to having Skylar Thompson being the quarterback for them for the next month or so of football. But I don't trust Skylar Thompson in big games. I don't know if he has a career win under his belt. And he's played talented defenses before. It's never been pretty. I think they struggle in Seattle. If it's a close game, it's because Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are that damn good. But I'm going to take Seattle here at home. Great defense. The offense has been amazing, led by Geno Smith. And I think they improve to 3-0 to start the season. Sneaky playoff team in the Seattle Seahawks. The Carolina Panthers, there's a lot that can be said about them. But, of course, they benched their last year's #1 overall pick, the first pick in the draft, to clarify, in Bryce Young. Look, I know this hasn't been pretty in the Bryce Young era, but Bryce Young, look, he's bad, right? He's not the same player that we saw in college. He seemingly has lost all of his confidence. You've seen his body language, his post-game pressers, the confidence from his teammates. Nobody has confidence in Bryce Young right now, including himself. So I think, sure, I can understand the rationale behind benching Bryce Young. Look, this is a team that is bad. Yes, they are bad top to bottom, but the quarterback needs help. And overall, this is just the worst roster in football top to bottom. This is a team that hasn't led in a single game in 275 days, ladies and gentlemen. 275 days. They haven't even led a game. Not even like 3-0, right? Not even like 7-3. They have not led a game in almost a year. And again, that's because this team is just bad top to bottom. Like I've mentioned, the defense, they were terrible last year. Then they went and traded away their best defensive player in Brian Burns. So the defense has only gotten worse. The offense still doesn't have viable weapons around their quarterback. And now they're putting Andy Dalton into a situation where he's expected to turn this offense around, turn it in the right direction. We're going to have to see for Carolina. But for the Raiders, huge win last week against the Ravens. The culture is set. I think it was a huge win under Antonio Pierce. And I think they're always going to have a chance, right? They're going to feel a lot like the Colts did last year, where they didn't have their star quarterback or they didn't have a superstar quarterback, but they were still going out there making minimal mistakes and their team kept them in the race and they always had a chance. The Colts were one play away from the playoffs last year. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the Raiders could be a team that can mimic that, especially given their schedule this season. But I'm going to take the Raiders here, no doubt about it. But I will say for Andy Dalton, there was an interesting stat that came out that if he starts the rest of the year, he has a chance to play all 4 of his former teams. Of course, the Bengals, Saints, Cowboys, and there was another team along the way. But I guess, hey, it's Red Rocket time in Carolina. We'll have to see if he could turn it around. But Max Crosby, he's in for a huge week. NFC West matchup here in 2 teams that desperately need to get back in the win column. For the Niners, you're dealing with injuries. Again, McCaffrey is dealing with an Achilles injury. He's going to be out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Deebo Samuel out probably the next 2 to 3 weeks with a calf injury. I think this is now all on Brock Purdy, and it is all on Brandon Ayuk. You paid him that money. He was a drama queen all offseason. Now it's time for him to play. Now it's time to him to play up to that contract and to dominate like an all-pro level receiver that we know he has the potential to be. You go to LA here to play the Rams. This is a trap game, I think. I think the Rams, this is one of those where it's like, no duh, right? The Niners are going to win this game, surely. And then you have Matt Stafford find a way with these subpar options, and they get a win here, right? But I don't think that'll happen. The Rams are dealing with as many injuries as the 49ers. I mean, the Rams' best receiver this week is Demarcus Robinson and Jordan Whittingham, a rookie out of Texas. It's not looking pretty for the Rams, but I know they're going to fight. I know they have one of the best coaching staffs in the league. and they're going to make this interesting, especially in a divisional game at home. But I'm going to take the Niners on the road. The Rams' struggles continue, unfortunately. I had them going to the playoffs, man. Here we go. Interesting matchup here. The Lions, they let the game slip away from them last week. I think they probably came into that game. It was a playoff rematch from last year's playoffs. And I don't know if they just didn't take the Buccaneers serious or whatever the case was, but that was the worst game I've seen from Jared Goff in a Lions uniform. No doubt he's going to bounce back. Aiden Hutchinson, probably the best game I've seen in a Lions uniform. All 5 of the team sacks last week were from the former Michigan man. Well, I guess still he's a Michigan man, right? Still in Detroit. Regardless, they go to Arizona, and this is an offense that is led by an MVP caliber quarterback. I have raved about Kyler Murray for the entirety of this podcast. He's my favorite player in the league, and I think he gives this team a chance to win. Last year, this team was amazing when he returned to the field. They were a top 10 offense in yards, points per play, points per, again, possession, and total points, right? This is an offense that was dominant when Kyler returned, and I raved about this team all offseason. I said they could win 8, 9, 10 games and make the playoffs. Now, again, in my official predictions, I had them outside. Regardless, Marvin Harrison, he arrived last week. 4 receptions, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns due to some miscommunications from the defense last week. But this is an interesting matchup. I think the Cardinals will make this fun at home. Home crowd behind them. Again, home field advantage. It's a lot hotter, a lot warmer in Arizona than it is in Detroit. And it's, again, it's probably going to be the one matchup that I am going to be watched or tuned into for the majority of it. But I'm going to take the Lions here on the road. I think they're a Super Bowl contender. I think the Cardinals at best are a playoff team. They sneak in there. But I think the Lions, again, they have everything. I think if there was a team to compete with the Chiefs this year, it has been, and it still will be, the Detroit Lions. They have the best chance to represent the NFC and to knock off Taylor Swift and the crew in the Super Bowl. I'm going to take them here to get a big win, back on track here on the road against the Cardinals, which are a formidable team. Maybe it's a high-scoring shootout there in Arizona. Baltimore at 0-2. It's their first 0-2 start since 2015, and the flock just can't finish, and we'll get back to that in a moment. For the Dallas Cowboys, you're at home here, and the, I guess, game plan so far this year has been CD and no D, or at least it was last week. Again, against a Saints team that you shouldn't have lost to, but you did. And I don't mean to say that to say the Saints are a bad team, but they are definitely overperforming at this point in time. My question for the Cowboys going forward, are you just too one-dimensional, right? Because you don't have a run game, and your receivers are not great outside of CeeDee Lamb, and Jake Ferguson is out with an injury. So are you too one-dimensional? If a team comes out like the Ravens and they just double or, hey, triple team, why not, CeeDee Lamb, who else is going to step up? Who else can be that reliable second to third option on a weekly basis when you're trying to make a Super Bowl run? Is that going to be the rookie Jalen Tolbert? Is that going to be the aging veteran in Brandon Cooks? Something the offense has to answer, right? But Dak Prescott is a top 10 level quarterback. He's going to give them one of their best chances to do it, to figure out something offensively. But I think finding a run game with Zeke or Rico Dowdle, whoever wants to step up, this is the time to do it. Here we go. Sunday Night Football. We have the Chiefs going to Atlanta. Look, Captain Kirk in the clutch. He didn't look pretty. He didn't look good at all. Really, the first 7 quarters of the NFL season. But that fourth quarter, man, he stepped up when it matters most in prime time. Of course, we know his history in prime time is not great. For him to step up and to lead that drive down and to look like old Kirk Cousins was a great sign for the Falcons. Now, I will say, I agree with Kirk Cousins. I think he needs to be a lot better going forward, and then that is going to unleash the full potential of this team that we all thought before the season. Everybody had the Falcons winning the division, and that's because Kirk Cousins, when he gets back to being what he was even last year for the Vikings, this team is going to be scary, and they're going to be a sneaky contender in the NFC. Again, they just need Kirk Cousins to be Kirk Cousins. Now, I will say all of their offseason pickups have been amazing. Justin Simmons had a great game last week. Again, Matt Judon has been amazing so far this year. Darnell Mooney offensively showed out. Money with 2 O's. All their pickups have been amazing. Now they have a tough matchup this week with the 2-time back-to-back defending champion Kansas City Chiefs coming into town. Now they are going to be Pacheco-less, as he is going to be out for the next couple months with a fibula injury. Now, this is a team that escaped last week. The Chiefs shouldn't have beat the Cincinnati Bengals, but they had some penalties go their way. And overall, two big wins against two teams that should be playoff caliber in the Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals to open up the Chiefs' season. I said this last week, and I'm going to continue to say it. I'm taking the Chiefs until they lose a game. Once they lose a game, I will start to evaluate these matchups and actually pick a different team. But the Chiefs, they have the longest win streak in the NFL, obviously, dating back to last season. And until they lose, again, I'm not going to pick against this best version of the Chiefs in Mahomes' era that we've ever seen. That's simple. Two Monday night games here to close out the week. The Jaguars at 0-2, they just lack consistency, right? We see flashes of offensive greatness, flashes of defensive greatness, but it's only for a quarter. It's only for a drive or so, and then it goes away the rest of the game, and then it's like the rest of the game, you're looking for this offense that you saw in the first two drives of the game. You're like, where is it, right? And it's, again, last week especially, we saw it. The third quarter of that game against the Browns, their offense looked great, and even for parts of the fourth quarter, but after those like two or three drives, it's like this is a completely different offense that we saw when we saw those signs of greatness. They just lack consistency top to bottom. I worry about the potential of this team. But my question is, how much of this is on T-Law? I think Trevor Lawrence has actually played great to start the year. Again, he had some bad throws here and there, yes, but that's going to come with this new receiving group that he has. But I think, again, how much of this is on T-Law, how much is on the coaching staff, and how much is just on the overall talent of the team. Something the Jags have to, I guess, keep in the back of their mind going forward. For the Bills, you're home here. Less is more. I talk about them a lot here. I'm not going to continue to say the same spiel week in and week out about the Bills. They're a top 5 team for a reason in my books. And last week, James Cook gave them a hat trick. So, again, shout out to James Cook. I have no reason to pick against the Bills here. They've shown everything. Jags have shown bare minimum. Taking the Bills at home here to improve to 3-0. The last Monday night matchup, we have Jaden Daniels versus Joe Burrow. Two great, historically, LSU quarterbacks. Of course, Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, both Heisman winners, and they get their first matchup here in the big leagues here on Monday night. For the Commanders, you have the first win in the Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels era. The question for this offense is because Brian Robinson has been great. Austin Eckler has been great. Zach Ertz had a bit of a resurgence last week. I'm hoping he can stay healthy for longer than his history tells us. But in this offense, where is Terry McLaurin? This is a Cliff Kingsbury offense that was brought in to get this guy, Terry McLaurin, the ball and to give him the best chance at his best season he's ever had. But Terry McLaurin is only averaging 4 receptions and 20 yards a game. No touchdowns on the year. That is not what you're supposed to do when you have a top 15 level wide receiver sitting there, right? Just running routes and not producing to where the levels he should be, or at least the levels we've seen in his career so far. We thought this was going to be his best season yet. Still plenty of time to turn it around, but excited to see if they could do that. Now, for the Bengals, T. Higgins, is he going to be back? I don't know, right? The last couple of weeks, it looked like they were going to be with T. Higgins, but he was a late game scratch both times. Last week, look, you cost yourself the game. 2 costly penalties late in that game against the Chiefs cost you the game on 4th downs. And again, you should be 1-1 heading into this matchup, but you're 0-2, desperate for a win. Typical Joe Burrow Bengals era football. Now, the positive here for the Bengals, look, you started 0-2 in 2021, the year you went to the Super Bowl, and you always start slow here in the first month of football. So for the Bengals, again, you're always in this position seemingly where you have this uphill battle to climb, but history tells us that if Joe Burrow's healthy, they're going to climb that mountain and pretty fast, right? And you're going to go to the top sooner than you think. So I'm taking the Bengals here. The Commanders just have a terrible secondary. Their front 7 is amazing, right? You have guys like Daron Payne, John Allen. Of course, you have Bobby Wagner commanding the linebacking group. But the secondary is terrible, and I'm going to take the Bengals here. If T. Higgins is back, in pretty much a blowout on Monday night. Now, here on the screen, you'll see Amir's picks as well as mine. The 2 games that we differed on this week, he took the Saints at home, and he took the Chargers on the road there in those controversial matchups. But again, on the season records in the bottom right of your screen, here is the 4 o'clock and the late game windows. That's going to do it, man. Episode 210 in the books. This might be getting out to you a little bit late today. Of course, 1 p.m. Eastern is usually when I like to get these videos uploaded. But Amir, of course, Collegiate Corner, has a lot going on and tried to hold off for him so he could be here for you guys as long as I could. But regardless, week 3, he'll be back next week for an interesting contenders and pretenders episode, which I'm excited for. But if you're a fan of fantasy football, Monday and Wednesdays every single week, we release shorter, like 5 to 10 minute videos every week about waiver wire pickups. Again, start sit decisions. You guys are already showing a lot of support on those. So if you haven't, I guess, seen one of those yet, every single week, Monday, Wednesday, I'm here to help you. And then Tuesdays, of course, NBA podcast as well. I have a lot of exciting stuff coming up in that realm as well. That's going to do it, though. I'll stop talking your head off. Go enjoy some football tonight. Some wrestling for you wrestling fans out there Friday, and football this weekend. I'll see you guys next week. Stay happy, stay healthy. Go Browns.